What kind of daughter walks away from everything her family built? That's what my father said before he threw me out of the house on Thanksgiving, in front of everyone. The turkey sat untouched, steam rising from the center of the table like some ironic peace offering. But there was no peace left, just silence, tense, cold, suffocating silence. My name is Belle Hampton. I'm 28 years old, and on that day I wasn't just cut off, I was erased. We were sitting in the dining room of my childhood home in La Jolla, San Diego. My mother had lit the good candles. Chase had brought a bottle of Pinot that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget used to. Everything looked perfect, except it wasn't. It hadn't been for years. Across the table, my father, Douglas Hampton, glared at me like I had just committed treason. In his world, I had, because in his world, family meant one thing: legacy, specifically his legacy. Hampton and Associates, the law firm he'd spent 35 years building, was more than just a business. It was a monument to himself, a dynasty he believed we were all born to serve. Chase, my older brother, had followed the blueprint perfectly. Harvard Law, top of his class, junior partner before 30, the golden child. My father never had to worry about Chase. He was the heir. And me, I was the variable, the one who colored outside the lines, the one who dared to say no. So when I opened my mouth and said the words I had been rehearsing for months, "Dad, I'm not going back to Stanford. I withdrew from law school 8 months ago," he lost it. The room went still. The silverware clinked lightly as my mother's hands trembled. Chase looked down at his plate, suddenly fascinated by the mashed potatoes. No one spoke. No one defended me. "You what?" My father hissed, each syllable cutting like glass. I withdrew, I repeated, voice steady despite the tightness in my chest. "Law school wasn't right for me. I'm pursuing something else." He stood up so fast his chair screeched against the floor. "You ungrateful little brat. Do you have any idea what you've just thrown away?" My mother opened her mouth as if to intervene, but quickly closed it again, her lips pressing into the familiar tight line of silent agreement. "I gave you everything my father spat. Private school, Stanford, every opportunity. And this is how you repay me." By quitting, I didn't quit, I said, still seated, still calm. "I chose a different path. Wrong answer. You're a disgrace to this family," he said, voice cold and low. "Get out. And don't come back." The last syllable hit like a hammer. No one stopped him, not even Chase. He looked away. I stood up slowly, napkin folding neatly beside my plate, my heartbeat loud in my ears, but my face unreadable. I'd practiced this moment in my mind 1,000 times, fantasized that maybe, just maybe one of them would see me for who I was, that someone would say, "Belle, what do you really want?" But that was never going to happen. Not in this house, not in this family. As I stepped out into the night air, the Southern California sky was cloudless. Stars shining, my father's voice still echoing in my ears. "Get out and stay out." I drove away without looking back. I didn't have a plan for what came next, but I had something stronger: conviction. Because what they didn't know was that for the last year, I'd been building something. Quietly, alone, something bigger than any courtroom, something that might change the world. But before I show you what that was, you need to understand how I got there and just how far down I had to go before I could rise. You don't wake up one morning and decide to disappoint your entire family. It happens slowly, like erosion, quiet, invisible at first, until one day the foundation gives out. I didn't drop out of law school on a whim. It took 2 years of pretending to be someone I wasn't, sitting in contracts, lectures while doodling renewable energy prototypes in the margins of my notes, reading case law with one eye while the other scanned articles on off-grid solar tech. It wasn't that I couldn't do it. I could. I was good at law. That was the problem. I was good at something I didn't believe in. The moment I realized it, I was walking across Stanford's campus after yet another lecture on tort reform, and it hit me like a sucker punch. If I didn't stop now, I was going to spend the rest of my life defending corporations I didn't care about for clients I couldn't stand. So I called Maya. Maya had been my roommate during undergrad at UC San Diego. She now worked at a women-led VC firm in LA called Revenge Capital. I told her about my AITA solar-powered plug-and-play infrastructure kits for developing communities, systems that could be installed in days and provide not just power, but internet access, refrigeration, and light. Her reply: "You should pitch this. It's messy early and complicated, but it's brilliant." That single sentence changed the course of my life. I moved to Venice Beach and set up in a co-working space with spotty Wi-Fi and no air conditioning. My salary was the occasional freelance research gig and a dwindling savings account. 17 pitch decks, 17 rejections. Some were polite, others brutal. One investor told me my vision was a cute hobby for a dropout, but I kept going. Because I had this image stuck in my mind, a little girl in rural Kenya doing her homework under a solar lamp we provided, her entire world expanding because of a battery pack I helped create. That vision. It fueled me through every rejection every night. I skipped dinner to make rent every time I stared at my laptop screen, wondering if my father had been right. Meanwhile, my family thought I was taking a mental health break. They called occasionally short, awkward calls where I dodged questions and played the part of the confused, misguided daughter trying to find herself. My mother never pressed. My father didn't bother and chase. He offered the occasional pep talk, but always couched in passive judgment. Maybe this is just a phase. You'll find your way back. They didn't see what I was building. They didn't see the designs, the sleepless nights, the research, the partnerships I was quietly cultivating with small manufacturers in Thailand and Vietnam. They didn't see the real me, and maybe that was my fault. Maybe I'd learned too early to hide the parts of myself they wouldn't accept. But I wasn't hiding out of fear. I was hiding because I knew something they didn't. The moment I succeeded, the reveal would be seismic. Then one rainy Tuesday in March, it happened. My phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. "This is Jessica Chen from Revenge Capital. We reviewed your Sun Nest Systems proposal, and we'd like to meet." I remember just staring at the wall for a few seconds before saying anything. Then I ran out into the hallway, rain pouring down, and screamed. For the first time, someone believed in me, not as a daughter, not as a backup plan, but as a founder. A leader, a visionary. That meeting would change everything. But I didn't tell my family. Not yet. Because this wasn't just about success. It was about reclaiming my voice. And when I spoke next, it would be on my terms. The elevator ride up to Revenge Capital's office in downtown Los Angeles felt like floating. I had rehearsed my pitch so many times I could deliver it in my sleep. But the stakes felt heavier now. This wasn't just about funding. This was the validation I had chased my whole life. Jessica Chen greeted me with a firm handshake and a warm smile. "You've stirred a lot of conversation here," she said. "Let's see what all the buzz is about." Inside the conference room, sunlight poured through floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the city's skyline. The other two women waiting were legends Dr. Amara Okafor, a Nigerian-born engineer who had revolutionized rural water purification, and Lisa Brennan, a former Wall Street powerhouse turned impact investor. These were not the types who handed out charity. They built empires. I took a deep breath, pulled out my slides, and began. I told them about Sun Nest Systems, about solar kits that could be installed by local technicians in remote areas, about powering community centers, hospitals, schools. I explained how traditional energy infrastructure was failing billions, how we could leapfrog that with something modular, scalable, and sustainable. I didn't sugarcoat the risks. I spoke about the 17 rejections, the doubts, the ramen dinners. I spoke like I had nothing to lose because really I didn't. They asked tough questions. Amara wanted details on supply chain redundancies. Lisa drilled into the financial model. Jessica pushed on scalability and deployment timelines. I answered each one with the quiet confidence that comes from living every line of your deck, not just writing it. 2 hours later, Jessica walked me to the elevator. "We'll be in touch soon," she said. "You're exactly the kind of founder we want." 3 weeks later, the call came. "We're offering Sunnest Systems $30 million in Series A funding. And Belle, we want you to join the California Renewable Council." I froze. I had to replay the words in my head. $30 million. For a girl they said was throwing her life away. I remember walking out of that call and just sitting on the beach for hours, watching the waves crash and roll the wind in my face, phone in my hand. I didn't tell anyone, not even Maya. This moment, it wasn't just mine. It was a symbol, a turning point. It was the first time I realized I had built something real, something mine, and I didn't need their permission to be proud of it. Within weeks, Vidian's legal team helped set up the company structure, hire my first 5 employees, and establish manufacturing contracts in Southeast Asia. The media caught on fast. TechCrunch, Forbes, even a feature in Fast Company about the climate gen startup you've never heard of. They called me the Stanford dropout who chose sunlight over suits. I moved into a modern loft in Santa Monica. It wasn't fancy, just clean, light-filled, and mine. I bought real furniture, slept on something other than a mattress on the floor. For the first time in my adult life, I didn't wake up with dread in my stomach. But here's the part that surprised me. I didn't want to gloat. Not yet. Because even as the headlines buzzed, my father still thought I was lost. Chase continued calling once a month, checking in like I was some drifting cousin nobody wanted to ask too many questions about. He once said, "I hope you find your way soon." And I smiled, because I already had. The best part, my name, Belle Hampton, had just been added to the California Renewable Council's member page. Official, public, undeniable. Still, I said nothing to my family, because this wasn't about revenge. Not really. It was about creating something so real, so valuable, that the truth couldn't be ignored forever. And the day they finally had to see it, it was coming. Thanksgiving was approaching again. A year had passed since the night my father roared across the dining room, "Get out and stay out." And despite the media coverage, the interviews, the Forbes 30, under 30 list, I had heard nothing from my parents. Not even a single congratulations. Because as far as they knew, I was still lost, still trying to find myself. And I let them believe that. Why? Because I wanted them to see it with their own eyes. I wanted the truth to confront them, undeniable, unfiltered, and on my terms. The truth was, I'd never felt more alive. Sunnest Systems had already deployed its first full-scale installations in Kenya and Guatemala. We'd brought clean energy and internet access to over 5,000 people, families who could now run businesses, children who could study at night clinics that could store medicine for the first time. But back in La Jolla, I was still the family disappointment. At least that's how they treated me. The texts from my mom came less frequently. Chase would still call occasionally, usually with an undertone of concern cloaked in condescension. "You should talk to Dad," he'd say. "He's still really hurt." Hurt. Because I hadn't followed his blueprint for my life. The irony, I was now advising the state on renewable infrastructure, a role his firm had unsuccessfully chased for years. But they didn't know that, because I hadn't told them. And yet, the longer I waited, the more I realized something. They weren't just unaware they didn't want to know. They were invested in the narrative of my failure, and nothing I said would ever matter as much as what they chose to believe. So I stopped explaining. Instead, I bought a house, a $7 million oceanfront mansion in Malibu with glass walls that opened onto the Pacific and a private stairway to the beach. It was ridiculous, extravagant, glorious, and entirely mine. When the purchase hit the real estate blog's mystery young tech exec buys iconic Malibu property, I half expected someone in my family to reach out. They didn't. So I planned my next move. I RSVP'd to Thanksgiving. When I walked into my childhood home that morning, everything looked the same. Same silver platters, same perfectly folded napkins, same forced smiles. Except I wasn't the same. Belle, you look. Healthy. my mom said cautiously, hugging me with one arm while stirring gravy with the other. Are you doing okay now? Translation. Have you come to your senses? I smiled politely. Yeah, things are going really well. She didn't ask more. She didn't want to. Chase and his girlfriend Kelly were already in the living room sipping wine and dissecting a recent Supreme Court ruling like it was reality TV. I sat quietly listening, nodding, keeping my answers vague, letting them fill in the blanks. But I knew what was coming. The conversation, the interrogation, it came just as we were finishing the main course. My father set down his wine glass, looked at me with the same calculated stare he used on hostile witnesses. Belle. He said, voice crisp and clipped. We need to talk about your plans. Spring semester is around the corner. If you're reapplying to Stanford, we need to get moving. It wasn't a question. It was a command. The entire room froze. I looked at my mother expectant, Chase stiff, Kelly curious. I set my glass down gently, took a breath. I'm not going back to Stanford, I said. I officially withdrew. A year ago. My mother gasped. Chase blinked. Wait, what? My father stared. You what? I left law school, I said calmly, and I'm not reapplying. Ever. The room spun silent. Kelly leaned back, clearly sensing what was coming. I started a company, I continued. It's called Sun Nest Systems. We provide solar-powered infrastructure for off-grid communities. Last month, we closed $30 million in funding. I could hear a fork drop, literally. My father narrowed his eyes. That's impossible. It's not, I said evenly. We've already launched pilot programs in Kenya and Guatemala, and last month I was appointed to the California Renewable Council. Kelly's jaw dropped. Wait, you're the one, the startup on the Impact Fund board? Yup, I said. That's me. My father stood up red in the face. You're lying. No, I replied. You just didn't think it was possible because it didn't follow your script. And that's when he snapped, get out and stay out. The same words, same volume. But this time, they didn't shake me. This time, I smiled. Gladly, I said. Because I wasn't walking away in disgrace. I was walking out as the woman they never saw coming. The next morning, I drove back to Malibu in silence. Not the defeated, heavy silence of last year, but something cleaner, lighter. I didn't cry. I didn't replay my father's rage. I didn't flinch at the finality of it. I just exhaled. The drive along the Pacific Coast Highway felt like a victory lap. The waves shimmered, the sunlight danced across the windshield, and for once I felt like I wasn't running from something, I was moving toward myself. When I got home, the first thing I did was take off my heels and walk barefoot across my polished wood floors, windows open, ocean air pouring in. The space echoed mostly empty, but I didn't care. This house wasn't about things, it was about freedom. Then my phone lit up. 7 missed calls from Chase. 3 voicemails from my mom, 1 terse email from my father's subject line. You embarrassed us. I didn't answer any of them, because they hadn't listened when I was drowning. They didn't deserve my attention now that I was soaring. Later that week, as I reviewed Sun Nest's Central America deployment schedule with Jessica from Vidian Capital, she paused mid-sentence. Oh, this is interesting, she said. We're seeing pro bono interest from a bunch of law firms. One of them is Hampton and Associates. I actually choked on my coffee. Hampton and... what? Yeah, your father's firm, right? They submitted a grant application to the State Renewable Program, something about launching an environmental justice legal clinic. I didn't respond right away. I just sat there stunned. After a beat, Jessica added, Did you know about this? No, I said slowly. They've never even mentioned environmental law. She shrugged. They must be pivoting. It's a smart market. Except it wasn't smart. It was opportunistic. I logged into the California Renewable Council's internal portal and pulled up the application. And there it was. Hampton and Associates was requesting $2 million in state funding to support vulnerable communities affected by climate inequities. I wanted to laugh. They didn't give a DMN about environmental justice. Not once in my entire childhood had my father mentioned a single cause that didn't directly elevate his firm's profile or bottom line. Now suddenly they cared. Right after I became a council member. The language was slick. The goals were lofty. On paper, the proposal looked perfect. But there was a fatal flaw. No experience, no partnerships, no credibility, and more importantly, one very large conflict of interest. I scrolled to the bottom of the page, clicked into the conflicts field, and typed, "Applicant has familial relationship to council member Bell Hampton Son, Nest Systems, CSO." Click. Submit. The rejection would be automatic. The public records would show why. In San Diego's legal circles, it wouldn't just be denied, it would be embarrassing. I didn't gloat. I didn't celebrate. I just sat there, the ocean wind rustling the curtains behind me, and felt calm. Because I hadn't orchestrated any of it. I hadn't sought revenge, but justice. It had a way of finding its mark, quietly, completely, and the moment my father realized he had to explain to his peers why their firm's shiny new green grant got disqualified, that would sting more than anything I could ever say. But the story wasn't quite over. Because just a few weeks later, someone else reached out, and it wasn't who I expected. 3 weeks after I submitted the conflict notice that quietly crushed my father's grant dream, I received a message I didn't expect. It was from Chase. "Hey, can we talk?" At first I ignored it. I assumed it was just damage control, another attempt to convince me to come back into the family fold, apologize, smooth things over. But then he sent another. Not about Dad. About something else. Something real. "I need your perspective." Curiosity won out. We met at a quiet cafe in Venice, far enough from the courthouse and corporate boardrooms he usually inhabited. He looked different. Not polished, not composed, just tired. "Belle," he said, offering a tentative smile. "You look good, better than last time." I raised an eyebrow. That's a low bar. He chuckled, but his eyes didn't sparkle like they used to. "I owe you an apology," he said. "I should have spoken up that night. A year ago. I should have defended you. Dad's always had a way of controlling the room. And I didn't want to make things worse. You didn't make them better, either," I replied gently but firmly. "I know." He paused. "That's part of why I'm here." He reached into his briefcase and slid a folder across the table. Inside was a proposal, a real one, a partnership concept between his independent legal startup and Sun Nest Systems. He had quietly left Hampton and Associates 2 weeks earlier. "I'm done being a shadow in his empire," Chase said. "I want to do something that matters. And watching you, honestly, it made me realize I've spent my whole life building someone else's legacy." I didn't speak right away, because this was the twist I hadn't seen coming. "Chase." I said slowly, "This is solid. Surprisingly solid. But why now?" He looked down at his coffee. "Because I'm tired of pretending. You were right to walk away. I just didn't have the guts to follow." There was a long silence between us. Then I said, "If we do this, it's not a favor. You'll earn your seat." He nodded quickly. I wouldn't want it any other way. In that moment, I saw a flicker of the brother I'd missed. The boy who used to sneak me snacks during late-night study sessions. The only one who ever made me laugh when Dad was tearing me apart. Maybe he hadn't been silent because he didn't care. Maybe he'd been silent because he didn't know how to speak. Over the next few months, we built something new. Chase led a small legal arm within Sun Nest, focused on equitable energy access law supporting communities we served in Kenya, Guatemala, and now Honduras. He worked under a new title, one he chose Director of Justice Partnerships. He never asked for credit. He just worked. Meanwhile, Sun Nest Systems continued to grow. We launched in 4 new countries. Our name appeared in government briefs, global conferences, and even an international summit on energy innovation. At the next Renewable Council meeting, a senior member joked, "Remind me again, Belle, how old are you?" I smiled, old enough to stop explaining myself. And that was the truth. I no longer needed to convince anyone, not my father, not the media, not even myself, because I had built something real, a mission, a movement, a future. And while my father might never understand the life I chose, the world certainly had. What would you do if your family disowned you? Only for your name to rise higher than theirs could ever imagine. I didn't shout. I didn't argue. I just lived, worked, built, and let the results speak for themselves. That's the power of quiet defiance. Have you ever been underestimated by your own family? Did you rise above? Share your story in the comments. And if this resonated with you, subscribe and pass it on. Because someone out there needs to hear that success isn't something you're handed. It's something you build. Belle Hampton, founder of Sun Nest Systems.